All right. So I guess the place to start is to take a look at the carried over action items from last agenda, the last meeting. Jonathan had some updates to make to the release plan, but as he's not here, I'm not sure what the status is, so we'll have to carry those forward again. Around managing the OpenJ9 issues, I had agreed to reach out to some of the other groups of committers and find owners for various components. I haven't done that yet. I will make sure that I've done that for the next meeting. And Jonathan was going to take an action to track and report on the issue backlog during each hangout. No Jonathan, so no one. And then the other item was the way we are tracking JEPs. Peter nicely went ahead and created the first set of issues for that, and Jonathan was going to take a quick look and provide some feedback there. I don't know if anybody else has taken a look at that yet and has feedback.
Yeah, I confess I haven't looked at it. Sorry, Peter.
I mean, there's not much there. I added some tags to say they were JEPs, and I pointed at the OpenJDK internal issue.
Right. I saw them get created. I just didn't have a chance to review them at all.
I'm tempted to close some of them because I don't think they have any relevance to OpenJ9. I was leaving them open just so people could see that they were there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think closing them makes sense. It'll keep our issue numbers manageable. At least there's an item we can always reopen it if we need to.
I guess I could go ahead and start creating some of the Java 9 JEPs, at least the interesting ones.
Yeah. So maybe we could send a link to the search for the JEP items that you've created, and then just like at the end of the week, the ones that don't have any comments and that we don't think have any work for OpenJ9 can get closed. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah. So we got put the query link in the minutes. Would that work?
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds good to me. Then we can advertise the minutes as hopefully at least as well as we did the meeting. On the topic of the JIT items, which you skipped over a bit, I have been actually looking through the issues just today and kind of going through all the ones that are at least identified as comp JIT. I haven't found very many that need to get closed, I don't think, but you know, some of them I've been poking just to get a little bit more information on some of them, and also to you know, just make sure we don't lose any information that we would have had when they were opened. I'm up to the ones that have been opened in November now. I started at the oldest ones.
Yeah, that's usually the best approach. It's easier to close things that are ancient.
Yeah, most of them are just things that we don't have, like the people who are working on this at IBM we don't have bodies to work on some of these things, but there are still good ideas, and there's, you know, a couple of them that are actually very good discussion topics that we should be pushing forward that we haven't you know, put much pressure on. So which I'll try to get some of those restarted because I think they're good discussions to have. And then I've also marked a couple as help wanted because there's one in particular I think that looked like a very much a beginner issue that just, you know, somebody could pick up and provide some value for very little effort. So I think in general we should be trying hard to identify things that are, you know, kind of beginner, you know, something that's not really critical key that we need to have done right now, but, you know, isn't a lot of effort, doesn't require a lot of sort of global understanding of the code, and just marking it as help wanted or beginner. And I think I added both on the one that I that I looked at, but just make it easier for people to approach the project, I think could be a good thing for us. A lot of the issues that I found are quite complicated, or you know, like add support for 256-bit wide SIMD instructions. It's not a small topic, and it does require quite a lot of understanding of you know, a complicated component tree in order to do that. But not all of them are like that. And just a thought.
No, it's a great idea. I will make a note of that. Just trying to get colors changed correctly. All right, so the 3 items we have left are the release mechanics pull request that describes the approach that we've been looking at. That was updated between the last meeting and now. So if you have comments, I think that's probably a great one to push the discussion to the pull request, unless there's any sort of higher level discussion anybody wants to bring up now. Not hearing any enthusiastic takeover, so we'll continue to discuss this in the pull request.
Do we want to set a deadline for coming to a resolution on that? Is that another kind of end of the week thing that we should be trying to push towards? Maybe.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. And even once we have the process in place, it's going to change and iterate as we go through
Yep.
it.
Yeah, it's still valuable.
Yeah, let's target closing this out by end of the week.
I haven't checked that item in the last couple of days. Has anyone else commented other than Philip and Andrew and me at this point?
No, just the 3 of you have commented.
All right. I'll poke Philip and Andrew to do an approval or something like that if they're satisfied.
All right, that would be appreciated.
Unless they've
right.
joined. Have they joined? Doesn't look like it. No. Okay. All right.
Just mention again, for anybody on the call, please update the Google Doc with your name and affiliation so that we've got a record of who attended. All right, the next item on our agenda was machines. Just to mention that ZOS and AIX are the machines that are missing from the adopt pool of JCK machines. So they're ones that we're unable to run full levels of JCK testing on, and that we don't yet have AIX builds at adopt for running testing, I believe, on AIX yet. So that's an area where adopt is looking for machines. And I know that our project itself, the OpenJ9 project, is also in need of machines. So we should be making a plan here for how to get additional machine resources.
Yeah, so I've been pursuing that with Shelly, and actually Shelly's done most of the legwork on it, but chasing down some contacts in the power development platform. We're trying to arrange, we're trying to find agreeable terms for IBM to try to provide some AIX boxes for the OpenJ9 and OMR projects as well to use. So we're still in the process of that negotiating, trying to figure out a reasonable price. And I think eventually we'll just have to figure out the right person to talk to, where it's just shuffling money from one place to another inside the same bucket and get that person to agree that they should support it. So that's for AIX. I know Joanne already has ZOS boxes available for OpenJ9, so we're kind of good to go there, I guess, when the builds get ready to actually be able to build on ZOS.
And I know there's work in progress going on there right now. There's a bit of work to clean up some of the files in OpenJ9 so that they build on the right versions of ZOS. That's in.
The port stuff that Steve Grover was running into? Is that
Yes.
what you're referring to, or is that okay? Yeah. Okay, cool.
So the one area where we're missing is, or in need of machines, is x86. We've been using Travis CI for compile only, but it would be really nice to have x86 machines that we control.
Agreed.
Sent as our P and Z Linux.
Yeah, that's one area. We should probably try to talk to the Adopt guys to find out how they, where they got their x86. I think Packet was one of the places that they looked at to see if they would be willing to also support our projects. Because yeah, I agree. I'd like to get off the automatic Travis build and test run as soon as the pull request is created model, and get everything to be running the same way with the pull request build once some committer is satisfied with the state of the pull request. I think that'd be a good thing for us to get to.
I believe the Adopt guys talked to Cloud Cone most recently to get a larger machine that can be split up for their x86 purposes. So,
oh, I see. Okay. Is that what they do for Windows as well, or is that just for Linux?
I'm not sure what they've done for Windows. I'd reach out to them.
Yeah, okay. We can chase it down. Yeah. I guess there's also OS X at that point too, once we get an OS X build working too.
Yes.
Somehow I always forget about that one. All right, anyway.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
All right, unless there's something else for machines. The next item on the agenda was to discuss the next release. This was mostly driven by Jonathan, so again, I don't have exact details on what he wanted to discuss here.
I think it was a question of what do we want to add in the next release? What should the requirements be? So I could make some suggestions, like DDR support, some of the things that are missing from this release. DDR support, proper signal handling, non-compressed ref support.
The time frame for this that we're thinking about, is that like the next quarter, kind of like is that the time frame that we're thinking about for this release?
I think it might have been 6 months after this release, but I need to double check.
Well, the release process we put together aimed to do a release every quarter to track the OpenJDK releases with monthly milestone builds.
Right. Yeah, that cadence makes sense to me.
Given that we're midway through this quarter already and haven't done the release yet, we may be squeezing ourselves on this.
3 weeks in.
I think we probably need to reach out to each of the components to try to get an idea of what their focus is for the next quarter, at least, and try to use that to drive the release contents.
I think just a general request out to the community of people working on it, just to see what people think they'll be working on for the next 3 months or whatever. I don't know that we have to break it down necessarily by component. We can organize it by component, but anyway. So basically that means we're pursuing a time boxed release schedule, and trying to see what content fits into the boxes, right? As opposed to driving it based on features being delivered, right?
Yeah. So we'll enable or disable things as required.
Yeah.
Any other comments or suggestions for next release or any other topics?
So how do we think we should, this is a totally different topic. How do we think we should advertise this call to try to improve the attendance so that we can get more people from the community, like among our committers and contributors participating in this, at least listening in?
I think one of the big things that would help that is to have a stabilized time and stabilized schedule.
That'll help. I guess we might want to do a little bit more advertising up front about the call, right? Send an email out to the dev list a few days in advance, maybe, as well as the pings on the Slack channel.
Shelley, how has Adopt handled publicizing their calls?
At one point they sent out a Google Calendar invite to everyone who indicated interest in regularly attending. Now they still don't always meet. They have that invite. I have that invite in my calendar, and then I check the Slack channel to see, are we really going to? So last week we decided not to, but generally everyone checks in at Slack now to, oh, are we meeting? Yeah. But it is nice to have the blocking invite in the calendar, because it tends to have it be that then you don't schedule other meetings at that time. I will say also it's handy. So one of the things they got caught with a couple times is no one who could host the meeting could attend, but there were people who wanted to meet. So having a few people willing to be hosts and coordinating that is probably good. But you guys have been very good about having the tools and being ready to record and host. So I don't think that's an issue here. Yeah, sorry I was late today. I see there's a point in the agenda as well to name component owners, and you were going to reach out for the test components, myself or Lan. I don't mind being the owner named at this point.
Maybe call them maintainer.
Depending on what that involves. What's that?
maybe maintainer rather than owner, but yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess we also are getting into a little bit better cadence. I know there was some request to make sure that we're labeling our pull request with the right component label. We hadn't been doing that all the time, but we certainly will start to do that. Were there other things like that that people had requested that I just haven't heard about?
I don't believe so. I think as we work on these things, we should try and document our expectations on these kinds of requests, and maybe initial points of contact for different areas to make it easier to get the right people when you're asking questions.
Yeah.
I think one of the other pieces might be just trying to make sure that the pull requests, when they do actually fix an issue, that the issue gets closed, so they don't kind of hang around. That's kind of another style of, or another kind of hygiene-like thing along the same lines as making sure that it's tagged properly.
Yeah. And I think the other thing I've noticed with the comp test stuff is that we're going to start regularly visiting the issue list, because they're looking at it last week. I've seen some things in there that there's no one working on them, and maybe we should up the priority of getting them done. So we're going to do that for our component, but I guess that's a hygiene thing as well for everyone else. If we're never planning to do it, it shouldn't live in the issues list, but if we want to, then we should get to it.
Seems like a reasonable approach. Things that are never going to happen, it's probably better just to close that and be upfront about it. We're down to, we had originally agreed to try to keep these things to around half an hour, so we're down to the last couple of minutes. Is there any other issues or topics people want to bring up or discuss?
Something I threw into the minutes but didn't mention out loud. We had an issue come up that seemed like it should be a blocker for the 0.8 release, and I wanted to identify that with a label, so I created a label called blocker and added it to the issue. I'm not sure that's the best name for the label, but that's what we have right now. Could be changed. If anybody has other suggestions for how to mark things as blockers.
Might be worth using the release tag on that, so that if there are issues tagged to that release, they need to be dealt with in some way before we actually complete the release, rather than just a generic blocker.
Right. Okay, I'll talk to you about that after, because I don't understand how that works.
You have to be a little bit careful, because it could be an issue that tag could be used for things that are reported in that release versus things that need to get fixed in that release. So I think we want to distinguish that, like have it be one of those two things, or have a different tag if we need a different tag for.
Yeah, something saying this is targeted to this release.
Yeah, something like that maybe. Or, given how our releases work, maybe we don't need to call out that it's 4.8. It could be like just kind of the next release tag. But then I guess, how does stuff roll over? All right. Never mind. Sorry, Shelley, you were saying something.
Yeah, just a quick, this reminded me of, do we have an actual wiki page at the GitHub repo describing the labels? I know there was originally the PR where we discussed it, but it would be worth having an actual static page, because in the last couple of weeks, people have said, what is comp port? What is comp build? Does build mean compile, or does that mean relinge? Or so it'd be nice to just point people at the static page. And that might just be grabbing the contents of the initial discussion and pasting it into a wiki. Yeah, and then we can clearly define what blocker means on that.
I noticed there's things called milestones. So it seems like we could make a milestone for our 0.8 release and then maybe tag the issue with that milestone.
All right, so we're at time now. So we should figure out the time for the next call. I'm assuming It's either 1 week or 2 weeks from now at the same time. Just trying to find a calendar.
I set them for 1 week for about a month. But that we can decide what to do. I wasn't sure if we wanted to meet weekly as we were coming up to the release and then change to 2 weeks once the release was done.
That sounds fine to me. I mean, we can always do the Shelley was describing the adopt process. If there really is no reason to have a meeting, we can just use the Slack channel to bail.
Okay, so we'll aim for the 31st of January for the next meeting.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.